At the will reading, my parents gave my sister $10 million and told me to go earn my own. Then Grandpa's lawyer stood up and read a secret he kept just for me. My mom started screaming. It was a warm September afternoon in Austin. When I pulled up in front of the old ranch house, the wind chimes on the porch clinked faintly. The same sound that once meant safety in summer afternoons filled with laughter. Now it felt unfamiliar, almost hollow. I hadn't been here in over a year, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd been told there was no one left to visit. When the front door creaked open, I was met not with a hug, but with a voice as cold as the rusted screen door it came through. "So, you finally decided to show up?" Grandma said, her eyes sharp, her arms crossed. I froze. Her words stung more than I expected. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping closer. "They told me you were in a nursing home. That you and Grandpa don't." She cut me off, raising one trembling hand. That single gesture felt like a slap. "Your grandfather called you Elena over and over on his deathbed. He kept asking for you, his little scientist, but you never answered. You never visited." My breath caught in my throat. "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking. "Please, let me see the number he was calling." She hesitated for a moment, then disappeared into the house. When she returned, she was holding a small notepad, the corners worn, the pages slightly curled. She handed it to me. I recognized Grandpa's handwriting instantly, but the number on the page wasn't mine. Not even close. "This isn't my number," I whispered. "I've had the same one since high school." Her brows furrowed. "They told us you changed it when you went off to college," she said, her voice quieter now. "Said you didn't want to be bothered. That you wanted space. That you were ashamed of us." "No," I said, stepping back, my legs suddenly weak. I grabbed the porch railing for support. "Grandma, I came home last spring break. I came here. Vanessa was here. She said no one was home." Grandma's face turned pale. "We were here. We've always been here. Elena, what are you saying?" "They lied to me," I said, anger rising in my chest, like a wave. "They told me you and Grandpa had been moved to a care facility out in Cedar Ridge. They said visitors weren't allowed because of quarantine. That it was best I stayed away and focused on school." Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked as if the wind had been knocked out of her. "They said, you didn't want to see us." She finally whispered, "That you said you had a new life now. That we didn't belong in it." A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and shaky. "I never said any of that. They cut me off from you on purpose. They didn't even tell me Grandpa was sick until it was too late. They told me the funeral was at 1 p.m. today. I got to the church and it was empty." She blinked slowly and sat down on the porch swing like her knees could no longer carry her. "The funeral was at 9 a.m., she murmured, realization dawning across her face like a shadow. They told everyone you didn't show. That you didn't care." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I would never miss his funeral. Never. He was the only one who believed in me. The porch blurred as my eyes filled with tears. Without thinking, I dropped to my knees beside her and buried my face in her lap. For a long time we said nothing. Only the wind spoke, whispering through the trees like it, too, carried secrets. "He died." Thinking I didn't care, I sobbed. "We know the truth now," Grandma said softly, stroking my hair like she did when I was little. "We know, Elena." Grandma wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve, then looked at me with a steadiness I hadn't seen in years. The sadness in her eyes hadn't disappeared, but now it was laced with something sharper. Resolve. She stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from her skirt, then walked into the house. I followed her in, unsure of what came next. In the living room, everything was exactly as I remembered, except the air. It was heavier now. She picked up the phone from its cradle by the kitchen wall. The old rotary phone clicked as she dialed, each number a deliberate choice that couldn't be undone. I watched her fingers, noticing how the skin had thinned over the years, the blue veins more prominent now beneath the surface. Yet there was nothing fragile about the way she held herself. The grief had hardened into something else, determination. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but when she spoke her voice had returned to that unshakable firmness I remembered from childhood. "Betty." "Yes, it's me," she said flatly. "I need you, Jacob, and Vanessa to come over. Right away." I heard a muffled voice on the other end. Grandma cut in before it could finish. "No, it can't wait. I'll be expecting you within the hour." She hung up without saying goodbye. Then, she turned to me. "The lawyer is on his way too," she said, her voice calm, but underneath it, something was burning. "Your grandfather. He left some things that need to be read aloud in front of everyone." I didn't say a word. I only nodded. I wasn't ready for what was coming. But I had nothing left to lose. An hour later, the doorbell rang. "Stay in the kitchen until I call you," Grandma said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. I sat at the small kitchen table, the one where Grandpa used to drink his morning coffee while reading science articles I'd clipped out for him. Through the wall, I could hear their voices, Mom's overly cheerful tone, Dad's calculated politeness, Vanessa's trademark bored sigh, then silence, and finally, Grandma's voice, clear and cutting. "Please everyone take a seat. Mr. Cullen Reeves is here to read David's will. That was my cue. I stepped into the living room. All three heads snapped in my direction. My mother's fake smile faltered. My father's face went ghostly pale. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came. I could see the calculations, spinning in their minds. Why was I here? Why had Grandma invited them under false pretenses? The living room felt smaller than I remembered. The faded floral sofa where my grandmother now sat, the armchair where my father perched uncomfortably, the antique coffee table with water rings from decades of iced tea glasses, it all seemed to shrink in the presence of what was about to unfold. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, with secrets about to surface. Mr. Reeves opened his briefcase, slowly, and pulled out a thick envelope. The kind that didn't just contain legal instructions, but secrets, too. He cleared his throat. I, Walter Dawson, being of sound mind and clear intention, declare this to be my last will and testament. The room went utterly still. Mr. Reeves continued reading. To my beloved wife, Helen Dawson, I leave our family home and a lifelong financial provision for her care and comfort. Grandma's expression didn't change. She already knew. To my granddaughter, Elena Dawson, I leave the newly constructed research facility at 482 Pine Ridge Lane, including all laboratory equipment, intellectual property rights to any ongoing projects under my sponsorship, and the funds required for continued development and staffing. The room cracked. It was subtle at first. A sharp inhale from Dad, the twitch of Mom's eye. But it was Vanessa who broke the silence. You've got to be kidding me. Her voice shook with fury. You gave her the lab? The whole damn facility. Mr. Reeves didn't flinch. And finally, the remainder of my estate accounts, assets, and investments shall be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Elena and Vanessa Dawson. The silence that followed was loud. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair screeched against the wooden floor. Her face was red. Her lips curled in disbelief. This is insane. No. No. I was supposed to get everything. That's what you said. She turned on her parents, voice cracking. You promised. You told me if I visited him, acted like the good granddaughter, played along, everything would be mine. I stared at her, frozen. They'd made her act, lie, manipulate a dying man for money. And she'd done it willingly. But Grandma wasn't done. There's more. She said coldly, reaching into the drawer beside her and pulling out a folded letter. Her hand shook as she passed it to Mr. Reeves. Walter wanted this read, too. Mr. Reeves unfolded the letter slowly, careful not to tear the brittle edges. The paper had yellowed, slightly, but Grandpa's handwriting remained bold and firm, as if he had written every word with unwavering clarity. He cleared his throat before reading aloud. To my dearest Elena, if this letter is being read, it means I'm no longer by your side. And though that thought breaks my heart, I hope these words carry some of the love I couldn't show you enough in life. You were always different, not in a way that needed fixing, but in a way that made the world richer. While others chased noise, you searched for truth. While they performed, you observed. You were my little scientist. My pride. My legacy. A sharp breath caught in my throat. I could already feel my mother's stare burning into me, but I didn't look her way. I watched you grow up with questions in your eyes no one around you seemed interested in answering. I saw the way you clutched your little notebook at 7 years old, recording how long it took rain to fill a glass jar. I saw how your joy dimmed every time your mother brushed you off, every time your father changed the subject. And I watched helplessly, as your brilliance made them uncomfortable, because they could not understand it, and worse, because they never tried. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Mom crossed her arms. Dad looked away. Vanessa was always louder. Easier to praise. More comfortable for them to parent. And so, they poured everything into her. Attention, affection, money. I don't blame her entirely for the way things unfolded. She played the part they wrote for her. But, you, Elena, you built your own script. That took courage I admired more than you ever knew. A tear slipped down my cheek. Grandma reached for my hand, gently squeezing it. I remember once, after you won your first regional science competition, your parents didn't even come. They were at Vanessa's dress rehearsal. You came to the porch afterward, holding the trophy in both hands, unsure of whether to be proud or ashamed. You asked if we could put it in the box under your bed instead of on the shelf. You said, maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's kid. My heart broke that day. I felt the room shrink around me. My mother remained stiff. My father had gone pale. Vanessa was silent, biting her bottom lip. You deserved more than what they gave. Not just things but recognition, warmth, space to be exactly who you are. And while I can't rewrite the past, I can make sure your future is built on your own terms. That's why I built the lab for you. That's why I changed the will. You're not a mistake. You are a miracle they never deserved. Mr. Reeves folded the letter slowly. The silence that followed was deafening. I remember the trophies, the box under my bed, the way I used to sit for hours, rearranging them like puzzle pieces I didn't know how to display. I remembered hiding certificates in drawers. I remembered Vanessa saying, nobody likes a know-it-all, every time I opened my mouth in front of her friends. And I remembered doing her homework for her. You're just better at this stuff, she used to say, dropping her books in front of me without even asking. Vanessa, that's cheating, I had told her once. Elena, help your sister. Mom had snapped from the hallway. Family helps family. But it was never help. It was control. There was a pattern. Vanessa demanded my parents enabled and I complied because I thought maybe if I was useful I'd be loved. Sometimes I'd hear them talking when they thought I was asleep. I just don't get where she gets it from, Mom would whisper. She's not like us, Dad would say, almost amused. Maybe we brought home the wrong baby. They'd laugh. I never did. I stared down at my hands now, older, steadier, stronger than the ones that used to grip a magnifying glass in the backyard, trying to catch sunlight in a jar. Grandpa had seen me. He'd always seen me. And now, he'd made sure the rest of the world had to as well. I was always the quiet one. The one who stayed behind while the rest of the family moved like a polished unit. Vanessa always in the spotlight, my parents orbiting her like planets to a sun. I didn't need their attention, I told myself. Not really. But, even lies grow heavy when you carry them long enough. While Vanessa danced on stage in glittering costumes, I sat in the back row of the auditorium, holding my breath every time Mom stood to applaud. She never clapped like that for me. I don't even think she knew when my science fair was. I remember one birthday, I must have been 10, Grandma and Grandpa had driven down from the ranch, and Grandpa gave me a microscope kit, wrapped in newspaper with a bow made from twine. I was ecstatic. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Of course, she'd want a box of germs, she muttered. Mom laughed. Well, that's our Elena. Always the little oddball. That night, I set up the microscope on the kitchen counter, too excited to wait. I'd prepared slides of pond water, bits of onion skin, flower petals, anything I could get my hands on. But just as I leaned in to focus the lens, Mom's voice cut through the hallway like a blade. Elena, clean that up. Vanessa's friends are coming over. I don't want your science mess out. She didn't even look at me when she said it. That was the pattern. Vanessa had people. She had parties, celebrations, the kind of family photos where everyone was smiling. I had books. Quiet. A world I built out of pages and formulas because the real one had no room for me. Even when I achieved things, scholarships, awards, invitations to summer research camps, my parents treated them like chores. I have to fill out more paperwork. Can't you skip this one? We already did the last camp. What about Vanessa's trip to Miami? We can't be everywhere. They didn't realize those were the only things keeping me afloat. Recognition from strangers meant more than silence from my own blood. And it wasn't just neglect. Sometimes it felt like resentment, like my very existence, complicated the story they wanted to tell about our family. At school, I overheard my mom talking to another parent once. Elena? Oh, she's our little genius, she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A bit intense sometimes, but we're trying to help her be more normal. I remember retreating to the bathroom and locking the stall, gripping the edge of the toilet tank to keep from shaking. Even in moments when I tried to reach them, when I got into the gifted program, when I was accepted early to university, they responded with fear, not pride. Are you sure you're ready for that? You'll be so far away. Don't rush through life, Elena. It's okay to be ordinary. But I wasn't ordinary. I never had been. And Grandpa knew. He was the only one who didn't try to make me smaller. He once found me, crying behind the barn after Vanessa had told me I'd never be pretty enough to matter. I must have been 12. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed me a pocket-sized notebook and said, write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. That notebook stayed with me, through high school, through every failed experiment, every lonely lunch, every invisible birthday. It was my anchor. My armor. Now, sitting in this living room, with that same family across from me, pretending I didn't deserve any of this, pretending I was the selfish one, I felt the full weight of those years settle around me like armor reforged. They had spent a lifetime trying to dim my light. But Grandpa built me a space where I could shine without apology, and now they had no choice but to watch. The silence, after the letter was read, didn't last long. Vanessa shot up from her chair, her face a flush of rage and disbelief. Her voice cracked as she spat the words. This is ridiculous. Why should she get anything? She wasn't even there. She disappeared for years, and suddenly she walks in and takes half of everything? The lab? The money? Her eyes darted to Mom and Dad. You said it was mine. You promised. My mother's face was blank, unreadable, but her fingers twisted in her lap like she was trying to wring water from air. We had an understanding, Vanessa continued, her voice rising with every word. I did what you asked. I played the role. I visited him when you told me to. I said all the right things. I was the perfect granddaughter. Her voice cracked. You made me beg a dying man for his favor. That sentence hung in the air like smoke, after a gunshot. Even Grandma blinked. And now I'm supposed to just share? Vanessa let out a dry, bitter laugh. With her. I looked up, slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time since I entered the room. I had no anger left, no fear, just clarity. You didn't visit him because you cared, I said quietly. You visited because you were told there'd be a reward. Vanessa froze. You never spent hours with him talking about books or experiments or his garden, I continued, my voice calm. You never sat by his hospital bed unless someone told you to. I may have been locked out by lies, but at least, I was honest about how I loved him. Enough. Mom snapped, standing abruptly. This is not the time to lecture your sister, Elena. You don't understand the pressure we've all been under. Pressure? I repeated, nearly laughing. You mean the pressure of hiding the truth? Of isolating me from the only people who supported me? Dad stood, straightening his shirt collar like he was preparing for a boardroom meeting. Elena, let's be reasonable, he said smoothly. Think about what you're doing. You've already had your education fully paid for. All those science camps, the competitions, the international travel. Do you know how much that cost us? The room tilted. My breath caught, then steadied. You didn't pay for any of that, I said, voice low but sharp. Grandma and Grandpa did. Every application fee, every plane ticket, every piece of lab equipment. It was all them. Not you. Dad opened his mouth but I cut him off. You made it clear from the start I wasn't your priority. You made that very clear. That's not the point, Mom snapped. Family means sacrifice. Vanessa needs this more than you. If you want to honor your grandfather's memory, you'll sign over your share. Grandma stood now. Slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. How dare you? She said, her voice so sharp the air seemed to thin. How dare you stand here in the house my husband built, and speak of sacrifice? Mom blinked. Helen, no, Grandma snapped. You deceived him. Manipulated him. You lied to his face while he was dying. And now you have the nerve to speak of family. She turned to Vanessa. You may have played your role, girl, but it was never love. It was a transaction. And, I'm ashamed to say, I didn't see it sooner. Vanessa's face twisted, but she said nothing. Grandma took a breath. Her hand gripped the armrest of her chair with quiet fury. I only regret that David left you anything at all. Then, she turned toward the door. Leave, she said, her voice steady. All of you. You're not welcome here. No one moved. So she raised her voice, not in volume, but in conviction. Now. Mom tried to reason. Helen, we're family. Not anymore, she said. Vanessa stormed out first. Hills clacking like gunshots on the wooden floor. My parents followed, muttering something about legal challenges and reconsideration. But they left. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't take anything with them. The house fell into silence again. A quieter silence. Not sharp. Just free. As the door closed behind them, I felt something shift inside me. Not just relief, but a strange new emptiness that wasn't entirely unpleasant. It was the absence of something I'd carried for too long, the desperate need for their approval, the weight of their expectations, the constant disappointment. Without it, I felt lighter. Grandma and I stood in the hallway, listening to the car doors slam, the engine start, the tires crunch on gravel as they drove away. What now? I asked, my voice sounding unfamiliar in the quiet house. Grandma looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since I'd arrived. Now we rebuild, she said simply. Just like Walter would have wanted. That night, I slept in my old room at the ranch. The ceiling still had those glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa had helped me stick up there when I was 9. I'd mapped out actual constellations, insisting they be accurate. I remembered him standing on a chair, patiently following my instructions while I consulted my astronomy book. Move Orion's belt 2 inches to the left, Grandpa. I'd called out, so serious about it all. In the darkness, those plastic stars still glowed, faint but persistent. Like memories that refuse to fade, even when everything else changes. It's been 6 years since that day. 6 years since the front door slammed behind my parents and sister. Their angry footsteps echoing off the porch, like the last remnants of a storm finally blowing out to sea. I haven't spoken to them since. Sometimes their names pop up on my phone, unknown numbers, recycled emails, friend requests through fake accounts, but I delete them all without opening. I don't need to hear their apologies, not when they're only born of absence. They made their choice. And so did I. The lab Grandpa left me, my lab, grew from a private research space into something real, something that mattered. We named it the Walter Dawson Innovation Center, and we didn't just keep his name alive. We honored his faith. We specialize in sustainable agricultural technologies, micro-irrigation systems, adaptive crop genetics, eco-friendly pest management. Things that once lived in the margins of science fairs, now, make their way into struggling farms across the state. Last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco accepting a national grant for innovation in climate resilience. I wore a navy blue suit and my mother's silence like armor. The crowd clapped. The spotlight didn't blind me. I looked into it and didn't flinch. And beside the stage, framed under the foundation's logo, was a photo of Walter Dawson, smiling in front of a field of sunflowers. The caption read, "For the dreamers who invest in those the world overlooks." Somewhere I think you saw it. The path wasn't always easy. There were nights I doubted everything, myself, my abilities, whether I could really build something from scratch without falling apart. There were failed experiments, grant applications rejected, moments when the weight of Grandpa's expectations felt too heavy to carry. But each time I faltered, I remembered his words, write the things they don't understand. One day the world will. And slowly, The center grew. First, it was just me and 2 graduate students working out of what was essentially a converted barn with state-of-the-art equipment that seemed almost comically out of place among the wooden beams. Now, we have a staff of 27 researchers, 4 departments, partnerships with 3 universities, and field sites in 12 counties across Texas. Tara and Micah, my closest friends since university, now lead departments within the center. We laugh a lot. We still mess up experiments. Still burn popcorn in the break room, microwave. But we also change lives. Not because we're smarter, but because someone believed we could. Last spring, we hosted our first youth science camp. 15 kids from rural communities, each with that same look I once had, hungry for knowledge, desperate to be seen. One girl, barely 13, with thick glasses and a quiet voice, showed me her notebook filled with observations about native bee populations in her hometown. Her calculations were rough but intuitive, her questions brilliant in their simplicity. When I told her this, she looked at me with such surprise that I had to turn away to hide my tears. "You actually read it," she said, as if that was the most extraordinary thing I could have done. I knew then that Grandpa's legacy wasn't just about the research or the facility, it was about breaking cycles, about seeing potential where others saw inconvenience. We've expanded the youth program to reach over 150 students annually now. We call it the Little Scientists Initiative, a name that never fails to make me smile. Each participant receives a leather-bound notebook, similar to the one Grandpa gave me behind that barn so many years ago. On the first page, we've printed his words, "Write the things they don't understand. One day the world will." Some of our first participants are now entering college with full scholarships to study environmental science and sustainable agriculture. The center itself has grown beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as a modest research facility has expanded to include 5 modern laboratory buildings, 3 greenhouse complexes, and over 60 acres of experimental growing fields. We've partnered with international research organizations from Brazil to Kenya, sharing our innovations with farmers facing the harshest effects of climate change. Last year, our drought-resistant corn variant helped feed an estimated 40,000 people in regions where traditional crops had failed for 3 consecutive seasons. The irony isn't lost on me that the very qualities my family tried to suppress, my methodical thinking, my obsession with details, my preference for quiet observation over performative confidence, are precisely what made this work possible. There's a certain poetic justice in that, I suppose. 3 years after the will reading, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Vanessa. She was requesting permission to visit the center. At first, I thought it was another attempt to challenge the will, but when she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished appearance, the practiced smile, the rehearsed charm. She seemed smaller somehow, more authentic in her uncertainty. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, standing awkwardly in the main lobby, staring at Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk. "I just wanted to see what he built for you. What you've built with it." I gave her the tour, showed her the labs, the greenhouses, the fields where we were testing new irrigation systems. She asked intelligent questions, took genuine interest. When we reached the community garden where local families grow their own food using our methods, she paused. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly. "Even when I didn't. Even when I pretended not to. We don't speak often, Vanessa and I. The damage runs too deep for casual reconciliation. But twice a year, she volunteers at our youth science camp. She teaches the kids about presentation skills, how to communicate complex ideas to non-scientific audiences. It's a small bridge, but it's something neither of us thought possible. My parents have made no such overtures. Last I heard, they had moved to Florida after Dad's early retirement from the investment firm. Sometimes I see Mom's name attached to charity galas in social media posts or local newspaper coverage. Dad occasionally appears in business journals, offering commentary on market trends. They exist in a world parallel to mine, neither of us crossing the boundary. Grandma lived at the ranch until last year, when her arthritis made the stairs too difficult. Now she has an apartment connected to my house in town, close enough that I can check on her daily but separate enough that she maintains her independence. We have coffee together most mornings. She tells me stories about Grandpa I never knew, how they met at a county fair when she knocked over his prize-winning tomato display, how he proposed with a ring tied to a sapling he planted in her parents' yard, how he spent 30 years tending that tree until it bore fruit. Sometimes I wonder if Vanessa ever thinks about that day. Whether Mom still hosts dinner parties and says, "I have 2 daughters," with a practiced smile. I wonder if Dad still calls himself a man of principle. But most days I don't wonder at all. What occupies my thoughts instead are the projects that line our research calendar for the coming years. The drought-resistant wheat variant that's showing promising results in our test fields. The solar-powered irrigation system we've been perfecting for small-scale farmers. The soil remediation technique that could transform depleted farmland within a single growing season. We've just secured a $25 million grant from the National Science Foundation to expand our research into climate-adaptive agriculture. It's the largest grant in our center's history, and I found myself wishing I could call Grandpa, hear his voice crack with pride when I told him. Instead, I walked the path behind the old ranch house, sat on the wooden bench he built decades ago, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Sometimes I still talk to him there, update him on our progress, share the small victories and frustrating setbacks. Last night, Grandma joined me on that bench. At 87, she moves more slowly now, but her mind remains sharp as ever. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, then she reached into her cardigan pocket and handed me a small velvet pouch. "I should have given this to you years ago," she said, "but somehow it never felt like the right time." Inside was Grandpa's pocket watch, the one he carried every day of his adult life. The silver case was worn smooth from decades of handling, the initials WD engraved on the back nearly faded away. When I opened it, I found something unexpected, a tiny photograph carefully cut to fit inside the lid. It was a picture of me at my first science fair, beaming next to my display on Honeybee Communication. "He carried you with him," Grandma said simply. "Every day." I've placed the watch on my desk at the center, where the morning sun catches it just right, sending little circles of light dancing across my research notes. It reminds me that legacy isn't measured in dollars or accolades, but in the quiet certainty that someone believed in you enough to invest in your potential. Our latest research project focuses on something Grandpa always talked about: finding ways to help small family farms survive in an increasingly corporatized agricultural landscape. We've developed a cooperative model that allows independent farmers to share resources, knowledge, and market access without sacrificing their autonomy. The pilot program launched in 3 counties last year, and already we're seeing families who are on the verge of selling their land finding new paths to sustainability. When I walk through those farms now, watching children help their parents implement our irrigation systems or test soil samples using our simplified field kits, I see the future unfolding in real time. I see families staying together, communities remaining intact, knowledge passing from one generation to the next, not despite change, but because of it. Yesterday, I was rearranging one of the old bookcases in the lab's library, something I hadn't touched in years. Tucked inside a battered copy of The Nature of Things, I found a photograph. I knew the moment I saw the faded edges. It was me, maybe 8 years old, crouched in the grass behind the barn, holding a magnifying glass up to a beetle on a leaf. Grandpa stood beside me, pointing to something in the distance. We were both smiling. On the back of the photo in his careful, deliberate handwriting, he had written, "My little scientist will change the world someday." I sat there for a long time, holding it like something sacred, because now I know he was right.